riling up his supporters and starting to scare some of his critics. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. With less than a week to go until the next and last presidential debate, Mr. Trump confronting serious new allegations head on. Over the last few days, more women coming forward, formally accusing him of sexual assault. The claims range from an alleged groping incident on an airplane 30 years ago to multiple episodes inside Trump's Florida home over the last decade. Hours ago, at a campaign rally in Florida, Donald Trump responding, not only denying the allegations, but turning on his critics and accusing the media, Washington, and the Clinton campaign of working together to bring him down. Watch.
The claims are preposterous, ludicrous, and defy truth, common sense, and logic. The corporate media in our country is no longer involved in journalism. They're a political special interest. The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty in order to enrich these global financial powers, her special interest friends, and her donors. Honestly, she should be locked up. Should be.
We have a huge lineup for you tonight and a lot of ground to cover. In moments, we'll be joined by J.D. Heyman, the deputy editor of People. One of his reporters is now accusing Donald Trump on the record of forcibly kissing her more than a decade ago. Next, we'll speak to Mark Thiessen and former Clinton campaign traveling press secretary Mo Alithi on what we're seeing in the polls tonight. Plus, Katrina Pearson, the Trump campaign's national spokesperson, is here. And then Charles Krauthammer takes a step back on how a presidential campaign, unlike any other, could be changing this country. But first, we begin with new reaction to Donald Trump's remarks today, which some in the media criticize as hateful, contemptuous, and even dangerous. David Wohl is an attorney. Ben Shapiro is an editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com. Great to see you both. And Ben is the author of the new book, True Allegiance. Ben, let me start with you because the Anti-Defamation League is coming out speaking about Donald Trump's language, in part that soundbite you just heard there, saying we really need to avoid rhetoric and tropes that have been historically used against Jews and spur anti-Semitism, keep hate out of this campaign. Your thoughts on Mr. Trump's tone and rhetoric today?
I mean, I'm more concerned about the fact that Donald Trump is constantly talking in terms of conspiracies that are going to overwhelm the American voter. It actually is a tactic of the left to talk about how the American people are being victimized by some shadowy forces beyond their control. And what you really need to do is just hand power to a very powerful gentleman to fix all of that. That's what troubles me more. As far as the allusion to international bankers, I assume he's talking about Goldman Sachs. But again, this sort of large conspiracy, these conspiracies writ large don't speak well of his campaign, and they don't speak well of the people who are buying into them. Before
I get to David, Ben, you used to work for Breitbart, and the head of Breitbart, the former head of the CEO, Steve Bannon, is now running the Trump campaign, or CEO of the campaign. The critics say that speech today was straight out of the, quote, alt-right playbook, that messaging that we're hearing, which has been criticized as, you know, having racist undertones, having anti-Semitic undertones. Did you hear that, or is that not fair?
Well, I'm always hesitant to cite anti-Semitism as the rationale for rhetoric like that. I will say that, you know, Donald Trump's campaign and what he's been doing since he hired Steve Bannon has been sort of a burn-it-down mentality. This is no longer about winning an election. This is now about rallying a certain group of supporters in order to believe that Donald Trump is really being destroyed by some evil conspiracy that stabbed him in the back. He's creating a stabbed-in-the-back myth before he loses so that he can go back to those people and then mark it off them or declare victory even if he gets destroyed at the polls.
What did you make of it, David? Because, you know, he's obviously feeling angry and feeling conspired against. And one gets the impression he can feel it slipping away right now. But that, you know, query whether that kind of a speech is going to help him win voters. What are your thoughts?
Well, Megyn, I mean, honestly, if you look at the media and the WikiLeaks releases, the substance of the WikiLeaks releases, if this was against Donald Trump and he had done all that WikiLeaks is exposing, the media would be talking about nothing else. The idea that they're talking about the women, for example, the women who are obviously collaborated and coordinated to make these simultaneous statements about events that happened, 10, 30 years ago, you know, the idea that they're giving that all the attention instead of the extraordinary weight that the WikiLeaks impact statements and the releases, the emails have, it's ridiculous. I mean, the Clinton campaign operatives' dirty fingerprints are all over these women's statements, their interviews, there's no question about it. This is all about trying to destroy Donald Trump. And if these were credible, Megyn, why weren't there any criminal complaints filed? Why weren't there any civil suits? Why weren't there complaints to the Trump organization?
Very well,
Nothing.
You know
Zero.
very well the reason for that. You know the fact that a woman doesn't come forward when she's been sexually groped doesn't mean it didn't happen. Most women,
but on an airplane,
sadly,
Megyn, on an
move
airplane,
past it with an understanding that they likely will be attacked brutally if they come forward, especially against a powerful
man. Megyn, they release. Okay, but that's one thing. But to release the statements 30 days from the election, when the WikiLeaks stuff is coming down on Hillary Clinton like a comet out of the sky, I'm sorry. I've got a big problem with that.
Ben, you know, here on this program, we've covered WikiLeaks. That was our lead last night. We covered the Trump stuff, too, but we did 2 blocks on WikiLeaks before we even got to Trump. There is a point that the WikiLeaks news has been largely ignored by many media outlets.
I mean, I agree that the WikiLeaks thing has been undercovered by the media. There's no question. But the idea that the media was never going to be against the Republican nominee, they weren't going to try and launch some sort of October surprise on the Republican nominee. I'm not sure what world we're living in anymore. I mean, yes, Donald Trump has been attacked by the media, but the person who's mainly responsible for stabbing Donald Trump is Donald Trump, who continues to stab himself in the chest with his own libido. You know, you do that for 20 years, and then you're surprised when somebody brings it up a month out from the election. The problem for Trump here is that it's not a he said, she said. It's a he said, and she confirmed. I mean, if there's no tape last Friday, and then he's not pressed by Anderson Cooper into denying that any of this activity took place last Sunday, I mean, I predicted that night that the media was going to drop every woman who'd ever kissed forcibly on him this week. I mean, it was obvious where this was going. Trump should have known it was going this way, and to claim that it's some sort of victimization campaign with Trump at the center, I mean, welcome to politics.
Well, but what, you know, David, what we do know about these women, one of the women who spoke out to the New York Times says she called them, and you know, she saw Trump's denial of the debate and decided she would call them. The People magazine said she had the same reaction. So there isn't evidence of collusion. You just suspect it,
Megyn,
but there's no evidence of it.
For them to all come out simultaneously in big media,
right after he denied it at the debate.
But Megyn, 30 years ago, I mean, there has to be some level of assessment of this, that she has no credibility. She had to have filed something. She said she was on first class on an airliner when Trump sexually assaulted, groped her, and nothing ever happened out of that. No one ever saw it. There were no witnesses. Absolute garbage, Megyn.
You know,
and look,
David, can I just ask you? Let me just ask you: was there a witness to Juanita Broderick?
Megyn, I don't know, but there was a lot more attention, a lot more credibility.
Well, the Trump supporters are very willing to believe her, so you can't have it both ways.
No. Did Bill Clinton ever deny Juanita Broderick? I don't recall him ever denying Juanita Broderick or any of the other women. I just remember his silence over this thing. And the great thing, though, Megyn, is Chris Wallace is the only legitimate...
You have to make a record of it when it happens. Otherwise, it didn't happen. Good to know. I know you as a lawyer know that's not true. I know you know that's not true. We're going to have more on that with another panel, but it's good to see you both.
It's an issue of credibility if you don't. That's all.
We also have brand new Fox News polls out tonight showing a big change in this race. In a 4-way contest, Hillary Clinton is now leading Trump nationally by 7 points. She had only a 2-point lead just last week. And that enthusiasm gap that has plagued Mrs. Clinton this entire race, it's apparently gone. Mark Thiessen is a Fox News contributor and American Enterprise Institute scholar. Mo Alithi is a former traveling press secretary for Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign, also founding executive director of Georgetown University's. I know it's too long. Let's talk about the polls. Let's just start with the enthusiasm gap there, Mark, that we just talked about. That was the thing. There it is, right there. That was the thing he really had over her. He used to have, look at that, 13-point advantage over her just October 3rd. And now she has a 3-point advantage over him on enthusiasm. Your thoughts?
Well, it's hard to be enthusiastic about your candidate when he's constantly imploding in front of you. I mean, if you just look at what's happened in the last few weeks, Donald Trump, just the last few weeks, Donald Trump had a terrible first debate with Hillary Clinton where he constantly interrupted her. Then he spent days attacking Miss Universe, tweeting out at 3 a.m. about her sex tapes. Then a video emerges about him bragging about groping women. Then he spends days attacking Republicans who distance themselves from him because of his bragging about groping women. And the result is he's going down in the polls. He's gone down 12 points among women age 45 and over, 10 points among suburban women, 7 points among white women with college degrees, down 6 points with GOP women. The only thing that's shocking is that it hasn't gone down further. So, you know, you've got a situation where you have Hillary Clinton is the second most unpopular person ever in history to run for president, but she's got the luck of running against the most unpopular person ever run for president of the United States.
Mo, you tell me, because you've actually run these presidential campaigns and others like them. What are we seeing? I mean, do you anticipate that Trump is seeing some internal numbers that are even worse than these, and that's causing him to lash out like we're hearing? Because we just got numbers today from Bloomberg on Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania, which had been neck and neck just a couple of weeks ago, is now Clinton 51, Trump 52. There's almost a 20-point gap in her favor when it comes to women. They're tied when it comes to men. He's got a 1-point advantage of her on men. So, I mean, the numbers, and by the way, among women, 69% of Pennsylvania say they were bothered a lot by that Access Hollywood tape.
Yeah, I don't know if he's seeing numbers that are worse. It's hard to believe that he could be. I mean, these numbers are absolutely brutal. And you're right, Megyn, it's not just the national numbers. We're seeing it in the states. The one battleground state that in the last couple of weeks, the Trump people could sort of hang their hat on was Ohio. And the latest poll that came out of Ohio shows that his lead there has evaporated, and it's now a dead even. I think he's got a 1-point lead there. You know, no Republican has ever lost college-educated women, right? That is sort of a bedrock of the Republican coalition. And he's losing them, and he's losing them badly, as Mark just pointed out, a double-digit drop in the last week.
But now, Mark, the Republicans who think that somehow they're going to make a point by voting Democrat up and down the ticket, that could possibly give Hillary Clinton the House and the Senate, your thoughts on that?
It's an absolute disaster. I mean, if you think about what will happen if Hillary Clinton is elected, and especially if she gets a Republican Senate and a Republican House, she is immediately going to replace Justice Antonin Scalia and shift the court in a liberal direction for a generation. And she may, if you think about Justice Ginsburg, Justice Breyer, and Justice Kennedy are all, in their 80s. They could retire at any time. She could potentially nominate 4 Supreme Court justices. So this implosion that Trump is having is horrific. And you look at this race, the Fox News poll shows that almost 50% of Republicans wish somebody else was their nominee. And they're right. If Scott Walker was running right now, if Marco Rubio was running right now, if George Pataki was running right now, he'd be crushing Hillary Clinton. But Donald Trump is the only person who seems to be able to save Hillary Clinton from herself. And she's the reason he might be the next president.
Quickly, do you think there's any chance the Democrats take the Senate and or the House?
I sense a sort of a bounce in Democrat step over the past week. There are a number of Senate races and House races that weren't necessarily top tier on everyone's radar that suddenly Democrats are starting to invest money in. I don't know that they'll get there, but it's certainly looking doable. Good to see you both.
Thanks, Megyn.
One of the most explosive new charges against Trump comes from a People magazine reporter who says Trump grabbed her moments after his very pregnant wife, Melania, left the room as this reporter was there documenting their 1-year wedding anniversary at Mar-a-Lago. Breaking tonight, just hours after the New York Times reported on 2 women who claim they were touched inappropriately by Donald Trump. We also learned of another woman who says she too was assaulted. In 2005, People magazine writer Natasha Stoynoff was sent to Trump's Florida estate to profile his first year of marriage with wife Melania. It was their anniversary. Melania was very pregnant. During the interview, Stoynoff was briefly left alone with the real estate mogul while Melania went upstairs to change her wardrobe. That's when, the reporter now claims, Trump abruptly pinned the reporter against a wall and started kissing her. Stoynoff writes, quote, "I wasn't in a locker room when he pushed me against a wall. I was in his home as a professional, and his beautiful pregnant wife was just upstairs." Those accusations are now being addressed by Trump, who adamantly denies the charges.
Why didn't they make it part of the story? I was one of the biggest stars on television with The Apprentice, and it would have been one of the biggest stories of the year. And by the way, the area was a public area, people all over the place. These people are horrible people. They're horrible, horrible liars. And interestingly, it happens to appear 26 days before our very important election. Isn't that amazing?
Joining me now, People magazine deputy editor J.D. Heyman. J.D., thanks for being here. So Natasha Stoynoff writes this story now, coming out with her story. And first, let me ask you, did you know about this prior to her writing it?
Only very recently. I hadn't known it at the time. We didn't work together at the time. This was something she kept very private.
What made her
want to
write it now?
Well, as you said at the top of the hour, very clearly, the release of the tapes, the Bush tapes, the Access Hollywood conversation, and then what crystallized it for her was when Donald Trump responded to a question at the presidential debate and said that he had never touched or kissed a woman without her consent. And I think that made her very determined to tell her tale.
What about earlier in the campaign, JD? You know, his treatment of women has been an issue for a long time. Why didn't she come forward earlier?
Well, I think the reasons are the reason why any woman doesn't come forward. I mean, she has felt a great deal of shame, fear. She was not a public person in that way. She's not a political person. It bothered her. It increasingly did bother her. But until he actually said those words that we all heard on the tape, she thought that, you know, she might have been an isolated case. She doubted herself. Hearing that articulation of what he said was his behavior confirmed for her that this was, as she says, his modus operandi with women. And that was, I think, bizarrely a relief to her. And then when she heard him say, no, I've never done this, that was, I think, in a way, a call for her to speak her truth.
She writes about it in the piece saying, like many women, I was ashamed and blamed myself for his transgression. I minimized it. It's not like he raped me. I doubted my recollection and my reaction. I was afraid that a famous, powerful, wealthy man could and would discredit and destroy me, especially if I got his coveted People feature killed. Today we heard from Trump on Natasha Stoyanov, who he knew fairly well. She'd been covering him, she says, for quite a bit when this happened. And this is what he said about her. Listen.
Take a look. You take a look. Look at her. Look at her words. You tell me what you think. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Do you think that's a reference to her appearance?
I think it's hard to mistake what that's a reference to. And I would say to your guest at the top of the hour as to why women don't come forward, I think that's a pretty good illustration of why she felt she couldn't come forward.
Do you think she's going to come out and speak publicly on camera?
Listen, you know, I don't really know. I think this has been a very difficult journey for her. I think that she, you know, she is a journalist. She is a professional. She works very hard at her job. She had something happen to her that was very upsetting, and this is a new role for her. I don't think that she feels quite comfortable being exposed. I think if you asked anybody in that kind of position what that exposure feels like, it's not easy. And, you know, I just want to underscore, because this had been discussed earlier, she had no awareness. We had no awareness of other women's stories. There's no coordination with anyone. This is a person we worked with and we care for.
No one reached out to you from the Clinton campaign?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're not a political magazine. We don't have an ideology.
Yeah, it's People magazine. You can't. You want to sell magazines. You don't want to pick a side in a presidential election. I understand that,
well,
JD.
no, absolutely. And by the way, Mr. Trump has been covered pretty glowingly by big media for many, many years. So I think that's a strange thing to say. This was one person's story, and it was a story we thought was important to tell.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me now, Katrina Pearson, Trump campaign national spokesperson. Katrina, I mean, you tell me, why would this woman at great harm to herself come out 11 years later and make an accusation like this and make it up out of whole cloth?
Well, Megyn, I'm not going to sit here and to pretend to know anyone's motive for doing anything that they do. But what I will say, the question is 26 days before an election, and they all have the exact same answer, and it was, oh, well, it was the debate. And I'm just not buying that. Mr. Trump has denied this. The witness that she herself has named has come out and denied this publicly, said that that never happened. Mr. Trump has never treated a woman that way in his presence. It would never put him in that position
butler who walked
to even
in on
deal
them?
with anything like this.
Is that
absolutely?
Yeah, but she doesn't say the butler saw Trump, is in her words, trying to shove his tongue down her throat. And she goes on to talk about how then they went back, they sat on the sofa. Trump looked at her and said, have you ever been at Peter Luger's for steaks? I'll take you. We're going to have an affair. I'm telling you. He referenced the infamous cover of the New York Post during his affair with Marla Maples and said, you remember? Best sex I ever had. It's very detailed. I mean, I'm not saying it's true. I don't know whether it's true or it's not true, but it's certainly very detailed, is it not?
Well, I mean, just like within the last hour, Megyn, one of the other women has already changed her story. So, no, it's definitely not true or true. Mr. Trump has denied this. I take him at his word for this.
But
this
why
is
don't you
something
take him
that
at his
happens in
word on the
political
bus where he
campaigns.
said he does do this?
Because that was on a Hollywood Access bus. He was with another guy in private doing what guys do in a machismo way, whether you like it or not. That's how that happened.
Yeah, but they were the fact that they were having a private conversation leads many to believe what he said was true. That this is guy to guy, and Trump saying,
Megyn,
I can't even control myself. I just kiss him without even asking.
Girls. But two guys that are talking about girls one-upping each other, making each other laugh, that's a little bit different. It's not like they were sitting there plotting on how to actually go about doing it. That's completely different.
Listen,
but in this case, Mr. Trump has denied these allegations.
He's denied them all. And I want to say this. We don't know whether they're true. We don't have time to adjudicate these matters one by one before Election Day.
But that's exactly my point, Megyn. We don't have time to adjudicate these.
And Trump finds himself in an impossible position because all he can do is say it's not true, and we're not going to have an adjudication.
Except the American people, they're a little bit smarter than that, simply because this did happen on the exact same day WikiLeaks has come out. We have found out so much of the corruption and the lies and collusion between the Clinton campaign and the media, as well as the banks, that they don't want to talk about this. The media doesn't want to talk about this. Megyn, tonight I'm here in North Carolina. Remember that hurricane that came through? 23 people died. The Trump Women's Tour has left the campaign this week because people are hungry here. Food banks are trying to feed 600 families this week, and the rivers still haven't receded. So we have a problem in the United States, and our countrymen don't even know that the people of North Carolina need help because they're so focused on what Hillary Clinton wants to allege about Donald Trump. It's disgusting.
Katrina, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Megyn. Thank you.
So the string of accusations being made against Trump are raising new legal questions about some of these cases could actually be considered criminal sexual assault. Joining me now, Jonathan Turley, professor at the George Washington University School of Law. Good to see you, Professor. So let's just start with that, and then I want to get into Trump's defamation threats, his defamation case he's threatening against the Times. Would this be, if he grabbed this People magazine reporter and kissed her against her will, is that a sexual assault?
Well, it certainly can be assault. Usually state laws like California refer to touching intimate parts. It can be breast or buttocks, but it can be the level of sexual assault is relatively low. What was described on the plane by Ms. Leeds would very likely satisfy that definition. She said that he reached under her skirt and fondled and groped her. That type of thing would satisfy the definition for sexual assault.
But that happened 30 years ago and would be outside the statute of limitations.
Well, it would be under the interesting thing is it's outside statute of limitations for a civil suit by Leeds. It actually is not outside statute of limitations under the criminal side because it occurred on an airplane, and federal law doesn't have a statute of limitations that I know of for that particular offense. Now, it wouldn't make a very good case to prosecute because there weren't any witnesses, contemporary objections.
Right.
This is not something that would likely occur. But he's got to be very, very careful. He can tweet himself into litigation. These women certainly have seen the statute of limitations expire. But if he attacks these women, they can allege defamation of their own. And he could find himself as a defendant in these cases.
So let's talk about that, because he's coming out. Trump is a litigious man. And, he says that's protected his business. People are afraid to come after him because they think they're going to get sued. And indeed, they might. The New York Times might get sued. But that move by Trump, and he sent a threatening letter to the Times, which first broke the news of these two women. One who says, a 22-year-old secretary says he grabbed her and kissed her in the lobby of Trump Tower, and one who said he groped her 30 years ago on a plane. That case would be fraught with peril for Trump. Explain.
Well, first of all, there is a point where litigious becomes frivolous. And when you file frivolous lawsuits, you can be hit by sanctions. I don't see the basis for suing the New York Times. Ironically, it was the New York Times that was the plaintiff in New York Times versus Sullivan, which set the standard for defamation.
Which basically means you cannot sue a public figure. A public figure cannot sue for defamation unless you can prove the person was out to get him and consciously, printed something that was false. But the thing is, the Times would turn around and seek so much discovery against him because it can defend itself with the defense that this was true. So it's going to try to prove that this was true.
Oh, would it be a field day for the New York Times? The New York Times is reporting correctly that women had accused a presidential candidate of sexual assault. Now, that's news on any level. I mean, you can't argue that that's not news. Now, they weren't saying that these are true. They were reporting something that's very significant. Now, Mr. Trump has every right to say that didn't happen.
Right.
These things happened 30 years ago. But to say that the New York Times shouldn't report that is a bit odd. Now, you can question the timing. I can see that. But to suggest that a newspaper should be sued for reporting something of that kind is very disturbing.
The Times is welcoming it. They want him to sue. And
Yeah,
here we
clear,
are,
yeah.
26 days out. Great to see you, Professor Turley.
Thanks, Megyn.
As we've mentioned, we've seen already some troubling things in this White House race. It's going to a much darker place for both sides in just the last few weeks. Charles Krauthammer is here on how this race may be changing this country. Stay tuned.
And you know who I'm talking about back there. You should be
New reaction tonight to how the media is handling the latest sexual misconduct accusations against Donald Trump. Trump's supporters are slamming the allegations and their timing and defending the nominee. Joining me now to discuss it, Monica Crowley, Fox News contributor and former foreign policy assistant to President Nixon. Kat Timpf, National Review reporter and a contributor to the Greg Gutfeld Show on Saturdays at 10 p.m. And Crystal Ball, a Clinton supporter and senior fellow at the New Leaders Council. Great to see you all. Monica, you've been such a defender of Trump's all along, and yet also a defender of women. And so I'm very curious as to your take on this. I mean, you have at least 6 women now coming forward on the record. And do you think it was all coordinated? Do you believe that?
Well, presidential campaigns have always involved some October surprises to try to derail other candidates. I mean, that's just the way the game is played, whether you like it or not. But when you look at the pattern here, Megyn, what you see is that 3 days before the first debate, the New York Times publishes the tax return story. And then 2 days before the second debate, you had the Access Hollywood tape leaked, even though NBC News had it since August. And now a couple of days before the third debate, you have the New York Times publishing these allegations from these women. So it does look like a coordinated attack, and given the WikiLeaks disclosures of the very scandalous collusion between the media and the Hillary Clinton campaign, I think it does raise a lot of issues. This is not a coincidence, but every presidential campaign and candidate has to deal with things that are thrown at them. The question is not what they're hit with, the question is how they respond.
Kat, you went on a tweet storm last night that got a lot of attention because you were taking real issue with the attempt to discredit all of these accusers by just saying, why did they wait so long? Why did they wait so long? Why did they wait so long?
Yeah, a coordinated attack, that's really taking it pretty far. It's typical for women in this situation to wait so long. The whole reason that powerful men go after less powerful women is because they don't have power and they can't say anything. Of course, maybe when that guy's about to become the president and when they have this audio tape of him bragging about what he did to them, that might spur them. And yes, when one comes forward, it does make it easier for others to come forward. And I think that you should at least consider it's possible that maybe a 22-year-old didn't at the time feel comfortable taking on a billionaire with a lot of influence and power when she was a secretary. And at least consider that and think about it before making accusations like saying it's a coordinated attack. These women aren't having fun. Look at my Twitter mentions for even just saying that and see if that's a party you want to be a part of.
But on the same, by the same token, Crystal, same thing's true of Juanita Broderick and Paula Jones and Kathleen Willey. They're getting attacked too, and they're getting their stories completely dismissed.
That is absolutely the case, Megyn. And here's the thing. I'm not here to defend Bill Clinton, and I'm not voting for Bill Clinton this November. I mean, right now what we have is a presidential candidate who bragged about sexually assaulting women, and now we've had woman after woman come out and confirm exactly what he himself confessed to. And I mean, in terms of the timing, imagine that you're an ordinary citizen living a private life. Can you imagine how scary it would be to inject yourself in the middle of this campaign and be scrutinized and have your public information, private contact details released, and everybody decide whether you're bangable enough for King Donald? I can understand why a lot of these women were hesitant.
Monica, I'll give you the last word, but especially when you've already seen some very prominent women come under attack relentlessly, who, you know, he never let up on for months and months and months. And I'm not just referring to yours truly. I mean, you tell me how, you know, this 22-year-old secretary was probably feeling about coming forward and accusing him.
Yeah, look, I don't know, and none of us know the truth about any of this. We weren't in the room, so we don't know, and we are in a he said, she said situation. I just think from a political standpoint, it is a question of how Donald Trump is going to handle this going forward. There could be something of a backlash effect if voters start to perceive that this is a pile-on, and it could actually perform the impossible.
I'm sorry, more
which is
evidence
turn him
against
into
somebody.
a sympathetic
More
figure.
evidence against somebody. You're saying more evidence against somebody is going to make more people think he's not guilty. What planet is this?
Remember that the backlash actually worked in Bill Clinton's favor.
Go ahead.
I'm saying more evidence, more people accusing him. You think it's going to make him look more sympathetic?
Well, that's what happened with Bill Clinton.
Okay.
No.
It had a backlash effect.
We're going to leave it at that. Thank you, ladies, all.
Thanks.
Up next, Charles Krauthammer on 2016 and America. As we've been discussing tonight, over the past couple of weeks, we've already seen a troubling White House race go to a much darker place on both sides. While the critics have had a field day with Trump supporters and his treatment of women, the Clinton campaign has some serious issues of its own, including questions about her honesty, her foundation, and how her team views people of faith. Joining me now, syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer. Charles, good to see you. And if there's one thing I hear from people more than anything else on the streets these days, it's that they just feel disgusted, that they can't wait for this thing to end, and they feel low. They feel grossed out by the state of our electoral politics. Do you think it's particularly bad this time, this year?
Well, it is particularly bad. This is I would say, the lowest, least honorable political campaign I've seen in 35 years. But the good news is that it is reflected in the fact that these are the two most unpopular candidates in American history. There is a sense in the country that this is particularly bad. It would be worse if that weren't true. Mm-hmm. And I think what you have also is on two sides the worst of our politics. With the Clintons and what we're seeing in the emails is mostly inside the baseball, but it shows the utter rank cynicism of Hillary Clinton, and that's one of the reasons her ratings are so low. On the Trump side, it's now gone way beyond cynicism into squalor. That's really where we are. And he's insisting on bringing down the House upon him like Solomon, meaning bringing her down, her husband down, the Republican Party down. This is an all-out fight of a man with his back against the wall. And you are right. After a day or two of this, people feel they want to take a shower. Mm-hmm. But I would tell you, this does not, there are going to be people who are going to draw historical lessons from this. I think not. This is an example of what can happen in a celebrity-soaked culture, in a place where reality television has such a great influence. And we are seeing a kind of monstrous soap opera on the political stage. I suspect future candidates are not going to want to repeat either of the performances.
How did we get to this point, right? We were just talking about the race in 2012 when it was like Bain Capital and, you know, whether Barack Obama was running an empirical presidency, right? How did we fall so far so fast?
Well, because on one side you have a very cynical politician in Hillary Clinton who doesn't have a message, because as we see in her own emails, they're not even sure why she's running, what she stands for, etc. It's all contrived, all thought out, all sort of a Potemkin village. On the other side, we have a reality television star who has no qualities that would make him fit for the office, is without a doubt the least qualified and the least temperamentally fit for office that we have seen in a long time. And you put them together, and you have a campaign with no substance. It might have started out with substance, you know, and essentially you could say immigration or trade, essentially what is happening to some parts of the white electorate, also non-white, who are being left behind. That's fine. But we are not even near discussing that now. We are now at the bottom of the barrel. That's how we got here. It's the choice of the candidates. Mm-hmm. And it is quite remarkable that the parties have elected the weakest possible candidates for their side, and the only one who would have a chance of winning because the other side has nominated so weak a candidate.
And now with 26 days to go, you can feel the populace bracing itself, Charles, bracing itself for what's next at the debate, or is there another October surprise, or how low can they go? Have we hit rock bottom, or are we going even deeper?
No, there is no, in this campaign, there is no visible bottom. We'll only hit bottom on Election Day because there'll be no time to go any lower. But the trajectory is only one way, and Trump is ready to bring down the House. Bring down, almost literally, the House around him. He's bringing out, parading around with accusers of Clinton, fine. But then when other people accuse him of similar behavior, he calls them liars and promises to bring evidence. Why doesn't he bring it now? Isn't this the time to bring it? Look, this is sunk so low that I agree with you. I don't know of anybody who doesn't want to see this end as quickly as possible. But again, I don't believe in apocalyptic thinking. This is not, some people are going to draw great statements about our politics. Yes, it is expressing a lot of this sort of the celebrity madness, the fact that Trump could have won the nomination in the first place. But I think Americans, Churchill once said, Americans always end up doing the right thing after they've tried everything else first.
Right.
Well, this is trying everything else first. We are right in the middle of it, and it is ugly.
Perhaps the right thing is coming our way. When and in what form remains to be seen. Charles, great to see you.
My pleasure.
Imperial presidency, not empirical, not a factual presidency, imperial, like a king. In any event, up next, speaking of kings, Brian Kilmeade is here on the sudden downfall of the once beloved Ken Bone. Say it ain't so. That's next.
We have one more question from Ken Bone about energy policy. Ken?
What steps will your energy policy take to meet our energy needs while at the same time remaining environmentally friendly and minimizing job loss for fossil power plant workers?
With that one question, Ken Bone went from audience member at last week's debate to instant media star. But in a tale as old as time, it wasn't long before the hero became the villain. Brian Kilmeade, co-host of Fox & Friends, is here on the rise and fall of Ken Bone. Brian?
This isn't an easy story for me to do, but someone has to do it. Crowdhammer wouldn't grab it. All right, let's start with the backstory. Cue the music. Ken Bone gets the word that he's needed for the audience. Yes, he's an undecided voter, and he's one of 40 to make the cut. 67 million people will be watching. Ken knows exactly what he's going to wear. He's going to be the olive green suit. The problem, he has gained 75 pounds since that picture.
Oh.
He rips the seat of the pants off the suit. Oh. Ken needs his second best outfit. There's only one stop to go, one place to go, Kohl's, where he gets a sweater that almost fits him. It's a red sweater, and he pulls it over and quickly jettisons himself to the studio, where in that red sweater, he sits for 1 hour. For 1 hour, he sits and waits for his moment, and then suddenly, it happens. Cue the different music. He would take the energy topic, and suddenly America would fall in love with the man with the square-like, boxy-like figure and a unique look. He'd have the instant fame of a Kardashian. He would do interview after interview, and suddenly he'd have a sponsorship deal. How do I know? When asked if Ken had decided who to vote for, he said, yeah, Uber Select. That's why Uber Select is his choice. He suddenly has a sponsorship deal, and he has a Halloween costume. It's a female costume.
No.
And before it could hit the shelves, it flew off the shelves.
Oh,
and there it is, exactly
Bone.
like Ken Bone,
Yes,
with
I'm in.
much better abs than Ken Bone, I might add. Cue the third selection of music. Disaster strikes, a headline hits. The New York Daily News decides that Ken Bone is not just undecided, he's an ignorant bonehead.
Oh, come on.
Because he asked a bad question. His sweater didn't fit, and his question could have been answered by looking at the website.
So
the St.
mean.
Louis Dispatch says he's got all the clicks in the world, and it shows that the media that created Trump created Ken Bone. Therefore, we say his star has dimmed. Soon it'll be destroyed. Welcome to America in 2016. Goodbye, Ken Bone.